The moment I saw the glint in my husband's eyes, I knew something was wrong. And my younger sister Lila's wedding, a dazzling event filled with laughter, candlelight, and music, Ethan, my husband of 12 years, suddenly leaned in and whispered, "We need to leave. Now." At first I thought he was joking. We were seated at the family table, surrounded by cheerful chatter, with the first course of a 5-star dinner being served. Lila looked radiant at the center of it all, her new husband by her side. Why would Ethan want to leave a night she'd been planning for months? But his voice was grave, his jaw tight. I could see the firefighter in him, kicking in the same man who once carried 2 kids out of a burning house. This wasn't a mood swing or a joke. Confused and reluctant, I followed him. Only when we were in the car, the hotel lights fading behind us, did he say something that made my blood run cold. "Lila tried to poison you." Growing up, my sister Lila and I couldn't have been more different. She was vibrant, outspoken, and the kind of girl everyone was naturally drawn to. I was quieter, more reserved, content with books and routines. Still, our childhood was full of shared secrets under blanket forts, late-night giggles, and promises of forever sisterhood. Even as life began pulling us in different directions, I always carried a soft spot for her. When our father fell seriously ill, I was the one who stepped in. I adjusted my real estate schedule to take him to his weekly dialysis appointments. I cooked his meals, tracked his medications, sat with him through his pain. Leah lived only 30 minutes away, but was always too busy. Still, I never resented her. I believed family shouldn't be tallied in effort, only love. When Dad passed, the house was quiet for months. I'd spent so long caring for someone else that I didn't know how to care for myself anymore. It was Ethan, steady, reliable Ethan, who helped me find my footing again. His job as a firefighter came with unpredictable hours and high stress, but he never missed a chance to check on me, hold me through my breakdowns, or simply make tea without being asked. Ethan and I had been married 12 years. We didn't have children, but our love had grown deep and quiet, like roots beneath the surface. He respected me in a way I'd never been respected before. Not just for what I did, but for who I was. And as for Lila, despite her distance during Dad's final years, I tried to reconnect. I offered to help plan her engagement party, bought her the shoes she said were too expensive, and even stepped in when she panicked over the guest list. I did all this not because she asked, she rarely did, but because I believed it was what sisters did. She would flash that dazzling smile and call me the world's most reliable big sister, and for a moment, I'd believe things were okay. Maybe I held on too tightly to the version of Lila I remembered from childhood. The one who cried when I scraped my knee, who left a Valentine's card on my pillow at age 8. Maybe I thought love and loyalty could erase the silence between us. Now, looking back, I realize how much I gave without questioning, how much I filled in emotional gaps, excused neglect, and convinced myself that closeness was just around the corner. But at the time, I believed I was doing the right thing for family, for peace, for love. When Lila got engaged to David, a quiet, successful man who owned a small farm-to-table restaurant, I was genuinely happy for her. She looked calmer, more focused, like she'd finally found someone who matched her rhythm. She even started calling more often, asking about floral arrangements or whether the wine pairing made sense. I thought, finally, maybe this is our chance to reconnect for real. Dinner one night, she laughed harder than I'd seen in years. "I know I don't say it enough," she said, swirling her glass of wine, "but you've always been the stable one, Amelia. Like the human version of a lighthouse." I smiled, touched. In hindsight, maybe I should have noticed how rehearsed that sounded. But I didn't. I chose to believe her. When we were going through Dad's things, I found a photo album he'd kept beside his bed. Most of the pictures were of me and him, from hospital corridors to backyard lunches. He'd written notes in the margins, thanking me for being his anchor. One page simply said, "To Amelia, my gratitude is endless." I showed it to Lila, hoping it would bring us closer, remind her of what we shared. She flipped through it quickly and said, "Wow, I guess he really relied on you." Then she changed the subject. Still, I didn't take offense. I figured she was dealing with grief in her own way. That was always my mistake, giving benefit of the doubt even when reality suggested otherwise. I thought love and history were enough to build on. I thought being a good sister meant standing by her no matter what. I didn't know then that love could be one-sided, or that sometimes your greatest wound could come from the person whose hand you once held crossing the street. Planning a wedding is stressful, everyone knows that. That's what I kept telling myself whenever Lila snapped or ignored my messages. "She's just overwhelmed," I whispered to Ethan late at night. "Once the big day is over, she'll be herself again." But deep down, I had started to notice a pattern, a coldness, a subtle wall she was building, brick by brick, between us. It began with the invitations. I offered to help address them, as I had steady handwriting and knew most of the family's addresses by heart. Lila thanked me, then handed the task to one of her bridesmaids, a woman she'd only met a year ago at a yoga retreat. "You're too busy," she said casually. "Besides, Ivy has the whole aesthetic thing down." Then came the bridesmaid dresses. I wasn't asked my opinion, just sent a link with a note. "Order this in size 6. The dress was fine, deep navy, modest, tasteful, but the message was clear. I wasn't included in the decision. I was informed. At the cake tasting, I was invited at the last minute, only to sit through it while Lila and David made every choice between giggles and inside jokes. "Oh, Amelia, you probably wouldn't like this one. Too sweet for your tastes," she said, without even letting me try it. I smiled through it, laughing along, though my chest felt tight. The rehearsal dinner was when I felt it most sharply. The seating chart placed me and Ethan next to distant cousins we barely knew, while Lila's college friends surrounded her. When I asked if it could be changed, gently, trying to sound casual, she waved me off. "It's not a big deal, Amelia. Why are you making everything about yourself?" I wasn't. At least I didn't think I was. What hurt more than the exclusion was the tone she used, dismissive, patronizing, as if I were an obligation rather than a sister. Ethan noticed too. After each event he'd take my hand, squeeze it, and murmur, "I'm sorry, you don't deserve this." But I kept brushing it off. She stressed, "I'll let it go." That was my mantra, over and over, let it go. Even the little things began to sting. She stopped calling me sis. No more emojis in her texts. No more asking my opinion on flower arrangements or centerpieces. Things she used to love brainstorming with me when we were younger. Instead, she delegated to her bridesmaids, none of whom I knew well. I was no longer her confidant. I was her formality. Once, I arrived early to a dress fitting, only to find them finishing up without me. Lila looked surprised. "Oh, didn't Ivy tell you we moved the time?" I hadn't heard a word. "Sorry, you can still try yours on though." Standing in that boutique, half-dressed in a gown I didn't pick, with 3 women chatting in a corner like I didn't exist, I felt like an outsider in my own family. But the worst was the way she looked at me, not with anger but with indifference, like I was invisible. Still, I kept making excuses for her. That's what love does, I suppose. It forgives before it understands. At brunch 1 week before the wedding, I finally tried to address it. Just Lila and me at a trendy little cafe she liked. I stirred my coffee, heart thudding, and said, "Hey, is everything okay between us?" She looked up from her mimosa, blinking. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. You seem distant." She paused, then smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Don't be dramatic, Amelia. You've always been a little sensitive. I'm just juggling a million things." It stung. Not because of what she said, I'd heard worse, but because I knew that wasn't the whole truth. She was shutting me out on purpose, and I had no idea why. That afternoon, she sent me a text. "Don't overthink stuff, love you." Words. I stared at them for a long time, then locked my phone. That was the last personal message I received from her before the wedding. Looking back now, I can see the signs more clearly. The avoidance, the exclusion, the way she made sure I was always one step removed from the core group. It wasn't just stress. It was intentional. The wedding day arrived with all the shimmer and shine Lila had envisioned. The Grand Riverton Hotel was dressed in crystal chandeliers, white lilies, and polished silverware. Guests flowed in like waves of color and chatter, their laughter echoing off marble walls. I'd spent the morning helping Mom with her outfit, wiping her tears as she pinned on Dad's memorial brooch. Everything looked perfect. I wore the navy blue dress Lila had picked for me. "It suits you best," she'd said, and for a fleeting moment, I believed we were okay again. Ethan looked stunning in his tailored suit, his firefighter's build giving him a quiet strength that still made my heart flutter. We sat at the family table, toasting with champagne, smiling for photos. Leela, radiant in lace and silk, floated between tables like a queen in her court. David never left her side. During the ceremony, I'd cried, tears of joy, I thought. When Lila met my eyes across the aisle and smiled, it felt real, genuine. But that illusion shattered the moment the main course arrived. It started with a change in Ethan's posture. His easy smile faded. He sat straighter, eyes locked on the waitstaff entering with steaming plates. "Are you okay?" I whispered. He didn't answer, just stared. The waiter placed a plate in front of me, sautéed white fish in a glossy golden sauce. It smelled incredible. Around us, guests murmured appreciatively, phones clinking. But Ethan didn't touch his own food. Instead, he leaned toward me, voice low and urgent. "We're leaving, right now." I blinked. "What? Why?" He didn't respond. He stood, took my hand, and pulled me gently but firmly from my chair. Around us, no one seemed to notice. Mom was chatting with David's father. Lila was laughing with bridesmaids. As we stepped away, I looked back. Lila's eyes found mine for a split second. Her smile faltered. That's when the fear took root. In the hallway, I pulled free. "Ethan, what the hell is going on?" "In the car," he said, his jaw clenched. The silence on the drive felt suffocating. Only when we reached a quiet residential street did Ethan stop, turn off the engine, and finally speak. "Did you notice Lila talking to the head chef?" I shook my head, confused. "She was pointing at your seat, your plate. Then the chef took out a small bottle. I recognized it immediately. Commercial peanut oil." My blood ran cold. "You're sure?" "I've seen it too many times. That brand, that label. It was deliberate. He poured it only into one dish, yours." "But Lila knows. Everyone knows. My allergy, it's life-threatening." My voice cracked. Ethan reached for my hand. "That's why I pulled you out. I couldn't take a chance." I sat frozen in my seat. My mind tried to wrap itself around what Ethan was saying, but every thought crashed into a wall of disbelief. "No," I whispered. "There has to be another explanation. Maybe she told the chef something else. Maybe it wasn't peanut oil." Ethan pulled out his phone and showed me a blurry photo he'd taken from his seat. The chef, the bottle, Lila's hand pointing at the seating chart. "She knew exactly where you were sitting, and I saw the chef nod before he added it. Amelia, this wasn't an accident." I could barely breathe. Memories flooded back that night 3 years ago at a restaurant when I'd eaten a spring roll and collapsed within minutes. Hives, gasping for air, blood pressure crashing. If Ethan hadn't rushed me to the ER, I would have died. "She knows. Lila knows. She held my hand in that hospital room." "But why?" I asked, tears welling. Ethan hesitated, then opened the glove compartment and pulled out a folded document. "Do you remember when your dad's estate finalized?" I nodded. I'd received 70% of the inheritance, as stated in his will. Lila got 30%. It was never about the money for me. Dad had explained his reasoning. I'd taken care of him daily for years. Lila rarely visited. "There's a clause," Ethan said, tapping the paper. "If the primary beneficiary dies before distribution, the full estate passes to the next of kin. In this case, Lila." My chest constricted. Ethan continued. "A few weeks ago, Lila asked me something weird. She said, if anything ever happened to Amelia, what would that mean legally? I thought it was a joke at the time. It wasn't." A sob escaped my throat. But Ethan wasn't done. "David told me Lila had dreams of turning his restaurant into a chain. He said she was excited to invest her upcoming funds. He assumed it was a wedding gift from family. But now..." The dots connected in a sickening flash. She needed that money, and she couldn't wait. A perfect accident, at a wedding, a known allergy, no one would question it. I curled into myself, sobbing. She was going to kill me. Ethan wrapped his arms around me. "Not while I'm breathing." We sat there for a long time, the engine ticking as it cooled. My entire reality had cracked open. Trust, family, sisterhood, all poisoned by greed. And yet, in that moment of devastation, I knew one thing for certain. Ethan had saved my life. Ethan pulled out his phone again. "I already filed an anonymous report with hotel security. We need to document everything. The photos, the sequence of events, your allergy history. If this goes to court, we'll need proof." The pragmatism in his voice grounded me. I wiped my tears, breathing ragged but clearer. "Do you think David knew?" "I don't think so," he said. "From what I gathered, he's in the dark, but that's something we'll find out soon enough." We drove in silence back to our neighborhood, the night swallowing the roads ahead. Every turn, every streetlight seemed surreal. I felt like I'd stepped out of my life and into someone else's nightmare. Just that morning, I thought I was gaining a brother-in-law. By nightfall, I realized I nearly lost everything because my own sister wanted me gone. Not for revenge, not out of rage, but for money. That night, sleep didn't come. I sat on the couch in my pajamas, a blanket draped over my shoulders, staring at the cold cup of tea Ethan had made me hours earlier. My hands trembled as I turned the events over in my mind again and again, trying to find a version that made sense, one that didn't end with my sister knowingly trying to kill me. But there wasn't one. I thought of her face at the wedding, glowing, elegant, surrounded by people who loved her. I thought of how she raised her glass to toast our forever sisterhood, how she hugged me at the photo booth and whispered, "Thank you for everything, Amelia." It had all been a lie. The ache that bloomed in my chest was unlike anything I'd felt before, deeper than grief, sharper than betrayal. This wasn't losing someone to an accident or misunderstanding. This was intentional, calculated. She looked at me like I meant nothing, I muttered. Ethan sat beside me, silent. He didn't push, didn't rush. He just sat there, one hand resting on my knee, anchoring me. After a long pause, he said quietly, "You remember a few weeks ago when Lila came by our place to drop off those engagement party invites?" I nodded. She asked me something strange, said hypothetically if something happened to Amelia, how would the inheritance work? My blood turned to ice. "You said that?" He nodded. "I thought she was just being dramatic," she laughed afterward, "but now, I think she was testing the waters." I clutched the blanket tighter. "She's my sister, Ethan, how could she?" "People do terrible things when they feel entitled," he said, "especially when they think they've been wronged." "But she wasn't wronged. Dad's will it reflected your love and sacrifice," Ethan finished. "You took care of him every day for nearly a decade. You gave up vacations, nights out, your own health. Lila, she didn't show up." I knew all of this. I remembered the nights sleeping on a cot beside Dad's hospital bed, the months I spent learning how to manage his insulin shots, the hours spent filing insurance paperwork while still meeting deadlines at work. And yet, I never expected a reward. I just did what felt right. Dad had seen that. He had written me a letter, tucked into his will. In it, he thanked me for being his anchor and compass. I kept it in my jewelry box, folded and worn at the edges. I stood up and went to retrieve it. As I read his familiar handwriting, the sob finally came, loud, raw, and uncontrollable. Ethan rushed over and held me as I cried. "She hates me," I choke. "She actually hates me." "She envies you," he whispered. "That's not the same." I curled into Ethan's chest, desperate to feel something that still made sense. For days, I moved through my routine like a ghost. I showed up at work, answered emails, smiled at clients, but my heart wasn't in it. The betrayal clung to me like a fog I couldn't shake. Everywhere I looked, I saw echoes of our childhood. A scarf Lila gave me one Christmas, a bracelet she made when we were teens. I couldn't throw them out, but I couldn't bear to look at them either. So I packed them into a box and shoved it into the back of my closet. Mom called to check in. "Lila said you weren't feeling well. Is everything all right?" My throat tightened. I couldn't tell her, not yet. "She's lying to everyone," I whispered after the call ended, "and no one suspects a thing." Ethan sat me down that night. "You're not alone in this. I saw what I saw. We have documentation. And we'll get justice, but first you need to take care of yourself." "What if no one believes us?" I asked. "Then we'll make them believe." His words were calm but fierce, and I clung to that, like a life raft. I wasn't ready to confront Lila. I didn't even know how to say her name without shaking. But slowly, with Ethan's help, I began keeping notes, timelines, names, details. It gave me purpose, structure, a reason to get out of bed. Because the truth is, I wanted to disappear. But I couldn't let her win. That night, before bed, I looked at myself in the mirror, truly looked. My face was pale, eyes swollen, lips trembling. "I almost died," I whispered to my reflection, "because someone I love wanted me gone." But then I remembered Ethan's arms around me, his voice unwavering, his loyalty. And I made a promise to myself. She would not break me. She might have cracked my heart, but she wouldn't claim my spirit. Ethan and I spent the next morning at our kitchen table, a legal pad between us, scribbled with names, times, and every detail we could remember. We approached it the way he handled a crisis, methodically, one fact at a time. "I want to help," I told him. "I don't want to just survive." He nodded. "Then we start with the hotel." Ethan submitted an anonymous report to hotel management through their official incident line. In it, he described the suspected food tampering, named the exact time and dish, and attached the blurry photo he'd taken at the wedding reception. The one of Lila pointing at the seating chart and the chef holding the peanut oil. "Security footage will confirm it," he said. "They'll have cameras all over the kitchen." Next, we reached out carefully to the waiter who served our table. Ethan had remembered his name from the name tag, Dylan. Through a discreet LinkedIn message, Ethan asked to speak about something sensitive regarding the event. Dylan responded within hours. Nervous but cooperative, he recalled Lila and the chef having a private discussion earlier that evening. "She said something about customizing a plate," he said. "Didn't think anything of it. People ask for stuff all the time, but now, I'm not sure." Then came the hardest part, looking through Lila's messages. Ethan had helped set up Lila's email on Mom's old tablet months ago, and the account had auto-synced. Neither of us had touched it since, but the login still worked. What we found made my stomach twist. Messages between Lila and David, some months old, discussing post-wedding plans, investments, restaurant expansion. One line stuck out like a knife. Once the estate clears, we can finally open the flagship downtown. It'll be our legacy. Your food, my vision. Another, after the wedding with my sister's share will be unstoppable. She'd written it so casually, so confidently. My hands shook as I read her words over and over, disbelief giving way to nausea. She really thought I wouldn't make it, I whispered. David's responses were vague, supportive, but uninformed. Nothing indicated he knew what she planned. He doesn't get it, Ethan said. She kept him in the dark. Still, we took screenshots of everything. The emails, the message metadata, the time-stamped photo. We backed it all up in multiple places. I wasn't just documenting a crime. I was reclaiming my power. At work, I returned with quiet determination. My clients noticed the shift. I was more focused, more deliberate. No longer the overly accommodating Amelia who let people walk over her. I set firmer boundaries, trusted my instincts. Sarah, my longtime friend and colleague, pulled me aside one afternoon. "Whatever you've been through," she said, "you're stronger now. It shows." I gave her a faint smile. It almost destroyed me, but it didn't. Meanwhile, Ethan kept in touch with hotel management. A week after his report, they confirmed the kitchen surveillance had captured Leela speaking to the chef and pointing to the seating chart. Even worse, they found footage of the chef adding oil to only one plate. Mine. That alone wasn't enough for criminal charges, but combined with the emails, the waiter's statement, and my medical history, it formed a clear picture. We met with a lawyer who specialized in family and estate law. She was calm, razor-sharp, and completely unfazed by the story. "This wasn't just a crime of greed," she said after reviewing the files. "It was a calculated attempt. You have a strong case." She guided us through next steps: a formal police report, documentation of the inheritance terms, a timeline of medical evidence. I signed everything with a steadiness I didn't know I still had. Mom called again a few days later. "Lila's been distant," she said. I hesitated. "I'll tell you soon, Mom," I said gently, "but I need you to trust me right now." Ethan placed his hand over mine. In that moment, I realized something important. The old Amelia, the one who excused, forgave, ignored her own pain, was gone. In her place stood someone wounded, yes, but awake, watchful, ready. I wasn't broken. I was rebuilding. That night, I lit a candle in the living room, not for prayer, but for clarity. I sat in silence, breathing deeply, letting the flickering light remind me that even in darkness, something still burns. "I won't be afraid of her," I told Ethan, "not anymore." He nodded. "You're not alone in this." And for the first time since that cursed wedding night, I believed him completely. The official confirmation from the Grand Riverton Hotel came 2 days later. A neatly formatted email outlined their findings: video evidence of Lila instructing the chef, confirmation from kitchen staff, and time-vague footage of the oil being poured into a single dish. Mine. They were forwarding the case to the local authorities. I sat at my desk rereading the email over and over, my fingers cold despite the summer heat. There was no longer room for denial, no possibility of misunderstanding. She had meant for me to die. That afternoon, a knock came at our door. It was David. His face was pale, lips dry, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. He held a small paper bag with muffins, like a peace offering. "Can I talk to you?" he asked. Ethan didn't move from my side, but I nodded. David stepped in and sat across from us. His voice trembled. "I just found out. The hotel called me as part of their inquiry. I didn't know, I swear I didn't know." He took out his phone and showed me a long message he'd sent to Lila. It was unread. "I believe we were building a life together," he said. "I thought her ambition came from passion, not malice." I said nothing. He added quietly, "She talked about the inheritance, but I assumed it was hers legally. She never mentioned you, never once." My heart ached for him, but I couldn't offer comfort. "She tried to kill me, David. This isn't just family drama, this is attempted murder." He nodded, shame flickering in his expression. "I know, and that's why I've ended it. The wedding's annulled. I've contacted a lawyer. I want nothing to do with her again." There was a long silence. "Thank you for telling me," I said at last. David left without another word. Later that evening, I sat in Mom's kitchen. The air was thick with tension. She poured tea with shaking hands. "Lila says it's a misunderstanding," she murmured. "She says she would never hurt you." I pushed a folder across the table. Copies of the emails, screenshots, stills from the hotel footage. Mom stared, then brought a trembling hand to her mouth. "No, this can't be right." "It is," I said gently but firmly. "She did this. She tried to kill me, and she's lying to everyone." Mom sobbed. "I thought I raised daughters who loved each other. I thought—" "She made a choice," I interrupted. "And now I'm making mine." I stood, my voice steady. "I'm pressing charges. Attempted murder for financial gain. I'm not staying silent." Mom didn't stop me. The following day, Ethan and I walked into the district attorney's office with our lawyer. I wore a navy blazer, not to impress, but to remind myself that I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a witness, a fighter, a survivor. We handed over the folder, the timeline, the emails, the hotel footage, the testimony from Dylan the waiter, and my medical history documenting the severity of my allergy. The DA's assistant flipped through the pages, her expression shifting from neutral to grim. "This is substantial," she said, "and it paints a clear picture of intent." An official investigation was opened that afternoon. The news traveled fast. By the end of the week, Lila was placed under temporary detainment for questioning. She denied everything, of course, claiming she'd simply asked the chef to make something special, and that the emails were misinterpreted. But the evidence didn't lie. Within days, the story leaked to the press. The headline read, "Bride under investigation for alleged attempt at poisoning of sister over inheritance." My phone exploded. Texts from distant relatives, old classmates, curious neighbors. I ignored them all. One evening, our lawyer invited us to her office. She was waiting with a solemn expression. "Her defense is angling for diminished responsibility, stress-induced psychosis," she said. I almost laughed. "Lila's been planning this for months. That's not stress, that's strategy." The lawyer nodded. "We're not letting this slide. If this goes to trial, you'll need to testify." "I'm ready." And I was. The woman I saw in the mirror now wasn't the sister who spent years hoping for closeness that never came. She was someone who had faced death, looked betrayal in the face, and decided to fight. The old dynamic, the one where I kept peace at all costs, was over. Now, I wanted justice. Not revenge, not cruelty. Just truth, exposed, documented, answered for. And this time, the story wouldn't be buried behind family dinners and fake smiles. It would be heard in court, under oath, with every fact brought into the light. That night, as Ethan and I sat in the quiet of our living room, he turned to me and asked, "Do you regret it?" I shook my head slowly. "I regret trusting someone who didn't deserve it, but I don't regret standing up for myself." He wrapped his arm around me. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." I looked out the window, where the city lights flickered like stars. For the first time in weeks, I felt steady. I was no longer waiting for Lila to be who I needed. Now, I was becoming who I needed to be. 3 weeks after the wedding, Lila was officially detained for attempted murder. The charges were clear: deliberate poisoning with a known allergen, intent linked to financial gain, and premeditation supported by digital and video evidence. Lila's lawyer tried to mount a defense rooted in mental instability. She was under emotional stress, the lawyer argued. Planning a wedding, managing family pressure, it overwhelmed her. But the prosecution wasn't swayed. The emails were too clear, the video too damning. The footage of her pointing to my plate, the small bottle of peanut oil, the chef's reluctant movements, all undeniable. David voluntarily appeared before the investigators, accompanied by his own lawyer. "I had no knowledge of any plan to harm Margaret," he said under oath. "If I had, I would have never gone through with the wedding." He submitted all his communication records. None showed awareness or consent. In fact, several messages painted a picture of a man being kept in the dark. "She said she'd come into money soon," he said. "But I thought it was just a family arrangement. I never asked questions I should have." His voice cracked as he added, "I married someone I didn't really know." He filed for divorce the day after the wedding. The moment I found out, I knew I had to cut ties. She used me to build a narrative of stability, all while planning a crime. When the news reached my mother, she broke down. She came to my house one evening clutching a photo of Lila and me as children. "She was jealous," Mom whispered. "I think I always knew, but I thought she'd grow out of it. I didn't realize." not like this." I said nothing. "She's still your sister," she pleaded. "Please, visit her, talk to her, maybe forgive her." Forgiveness. A beautiful word. A heavy one. "I can't, Mom," I said steadily but not unkind. "She tried to kill me, not in rage, not by mistake, but with planning and intention." Tears filled her eyes. "She's family," she insisted again, weakly. "She was," I replied. "But family doesn't do this, not to someone they claim to love." I walked her to the door gently, hugged her, promised I'd stay in touch. But in my heart I closed the last door to Lila. Sisterhood, for me, ended that day. The trial was scheduled 6 months later. By then, my life had returned to a cautious rhythm: work, friends, therapy, and quiet weekends with Ethan. I had learned to smile again, though more carefully. I had learned to trust, not blindly, but bravely. Lila was found guilty on all charges. The sentence 12 years in state prison. Her attempt to plea for diminished responsibility was rejected. The court declared her actions calculated, motivated by greed, and devoid of remorse. She didn't look at me once during the trial. Not when the verdict was read, not even when she was led away in handcuffs. David sat in the back row throughout the proceedings. He sent me a note after sentencing. "Thank you for standing your ground. You saved more than just yourself." Mom never visited Lila in prison. The shame was too much. But she also never stopped setting a place for her at family dinners, a quiet gesture of mourning, not hope. As for me, I stopped keeping old photographs on the mantle, not out of bitterness, but because they belonged to a time that no longer existed. Some endings are final, and some are necessary. Lila made her choice, I made mine. And for the first time in years, I chose myself. In the months that followed Lila's sentencing, I found myself relearning how to live and how to love. At first, everything felt muted. I'd go to work, answer emails, cook dinner with Ethan, but my spirit moved with caution, like someone navigating a forest after a wildfire. I didn't know what could still burn. But slowly, through the mundane and the meaningful, I began to reclaim the space I once shared with shadows. One morning, while walking through the farmer's market with Sarah, my closest friend, she looked at me and said, "You're lighter now." I smiled, realizing it was true. Grief hadn't left me, but it had settled in a quiet corner of my heart, replaced in part by clarity. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the husband who pulled me out of a banquet hall because his instincts screamed danger. It's the friend who stayed on the phone with me during my first panic attack after the incident. It's the colleague who covered for me at work when I couldn't get out of bed. It's the people who choose you, not out of obligation but love. And in turn, I chose them. Ethan remained my anchor, steady, selfless, never asking for more than I could give. One evening, as we watched the rain from our kitchen window, he turned to me and said, "You've been through hell, but you never let it change your heart." That was the moment I knew I hadn't just survived, I had grown. Lila's betrayal had taught me the hardest truth of all, that not everyone you love will love you back the way you deserve, and that's okay. I don't hate her, I don't wish her pain. But I no longer carry the burden of hoping she'll become someone else. I've set it down. Sometimes forgiveness isn't about being noble, sometimes it's about release, and sometimes it's simply not necessary. The narrative of my life isn't defined by betrayal, but by resilience. When I think of my father now, I remember his laugh, his garden, the way he always said, "Kindness is what makes a life worth living." I think he'd be proud of me, not because I pressed charges, but because I learned to honor myself. And for the first time, I look at the future not with dread, but with possibility. We're planning a trip next spring, Ethan and I, to a small town by the coast, where wildflowers bloom for only a week each year. It's something we've always talked about. I used to delay joy, now I seek it. The past remains a part of me, but it doesn't define me. I'm not just a survivor of someone else's story. I'm the author of my own. And that, more than anything, is my happy ending. Some nights, I still dream of her, the sister I once adored, but even in dreams, I don't reach for her anymore. Instead, I reach for Ethan's hand. For peace. For a life where love is real and earned and safe. I walk forward, not because the past is behind me, but because the people I walk with now are worth every step ahead.